Hello, everyone, and thank you for watching our presentation on how an HBCU library is using Geographic Information Systems, commonly referred to as GIS. This panel will examine the use of GIS in a variety of ways: archives, disaster preparedness, and library instruction. So I'm Brittany Newberry, a processing archivist at the Atlanta University Center Archives Research Center. Today, I will be discussing a project that I have been working on, historical maps and GIS applications, what I have learned, benefits and challenges, and how this can be used in archives. First, I would like to start with an overview of the Atlanta University Center, or AUC, and the Archives Research Center. The AUC is the largest consortium of historically Black colleges and universities, HBCUs. It was established in 1929, and the original members were Atlanta University, Morehouse College, and Spelman College. As of today, the consortium is comprised of 4 institutions: Clark Atlanta University, Spelman College, Morehouse College, and the Interdenominational Theological Center. The AUC is a library for these 4 institutions and serves as the academic hub for scholarship and resources. The Archives Research Center collections reflect the diverse contributions, achievements, and experiences of African Americans and the African diaspora. The Archives Research Center contains over 150 manuscript, photograph, and book collections that are accessible to the public. The main focus of the archive consists of documenting African American history and culture in Atlanta, Georgia, and the South. We have a combination of both primary and secondary resources available, and they cover many disciplines and detailed topics, such as higher education among African Americans, African American organizations, race relations, civil rights, and African American culture in Atlanta, Georgia. One of these collections that I process is the Grace Towns Hamilton Papers. This collection started the project and the work that I continue to do. It documents the life and career of Grace Towns Hamilton, the first African-American woman elected to the Georgia General Assembly in 1965. Hamilton served in the Georgia House of Representatives from 1965 to 1984. During her tenure, she represented the Vine City area of Atlanta, Georgia. She advocated for more representation for African Americans, such as on the Atlanta City Council, and worked on the reapportionment of Atlanta congressional districts after the Voting Rights Act of 1965. The collection consists of personal papers, Georgia General Assembly materials, correspondence, photographs, publications such as newspapers and pamphlets, and of course, maps. So during processing, I discovered a large amount of maps. These maps are from the 1960s through 1980s and show topics such as redistricting of Atlanta's congressional districts, voting districts, Georgia counties, and more. After starting this collection, I was able to attend a Geographic Information Systems workshop at the Clark Atlanta University GIS lab to generally learn about GIS. This lab has a map scanner, and the GIS coordinator and I were able to discuss the maps in the collection. As a result, a partnership was formed between the GIS lab and the archives, a partnership that allowed me to scan all the maps in the collection. Once I had completed scanning, I had digitized over 170 maps from the collection. Next, I will go over GIS and the applications I researched and used for the project. So what is GIS? A Geographic Information System, or GIS, is a framework for gathering, managing, and analyzing data. It is based in the science of geography and integrates many types of data. GIS analyzes spatial location and organizes layers of information into visualizations using maps and 3D scenes. It reveals deeper insights into data, such as patterns, relationships, and situations, helping users make decisions. Organizations in virtually every field are using GIS to make maps that communicate, perform analysis, share information, and solve complex problems around the world. GIS technology applies geographic science with tools for understanding and collaboration. There are multiple applications that can be used to perform the various aspects of GIS. I've listed on the screen the ones that I have investigated and used. I will now go over specifically what from GIS that I believe can be used in archives and how these applications fit in. So how can GIS technology be used in archives? My project and work in the archives brought me to consider not just using GIS to map data from collections in the archive, but also how to use historical maps. For that, I looked at the georeferencing feature. Georeferencing means to associate something with locations in physical space. The term is commonly used in the GIS field to describe the process of associating a physical map or raster image of a map with spatial locations. Georeferencing may be applied to any kind of object or structure that can be related to a geographical location, such as points of interest, roads, places, bridges, or buildings. So what applications can you use for georeferencing in archives? For me, I investigated 3. QGIS, which is previously known as Quantum GIS, is a free and open source cross-platform desktop GIS application that supports viewing, editing, and analysis of geospatial data. ArcGIS is a geographic information system for working with maps and geographic information. It is used for creating and using maps, compiling geographic data, analyzing mapped information, sharing and discovering geographic information, using maps and geographic information in a range of applications, and managing that information in a database. The system provides an infrastructure for making maps and the information available throughout an organization across the community and openly on the web. ArcGIS includes a Windows desktop software, which can be used for georeferencing. Both online and desktop applications are not free to use. They have costs and fees, but for educational and nonprofit institutions, Esri, the company that runs ArcGIS, offers discounts for the applications and servers for the data. Additionally, ArcGIS offers Storymaps, a digital exhibit-like online application for displaying maps, text, images, documents, and data that is free to use for those who want to use the application without incorporating georeference maps and maps created through ArcGIS. Neatline with Omeka is a geotemporal exhibit builder that allows you to create complex maps, image annotation, and narrative sequences from Omeka collections of archives and artifacts to connect your maps and narratives with timelines. Neatline lets you make handcrafted interactive stories. You can import these documents, georeference historical maps, manuscripts, high-res photographs, and more from an existing collection or create a new digital archive yourself. It's a free plugin for Omeka. To use georeference maps, you can use the open source application MapWarper at mapwarper.net. Neatline offers a tutorial on how to use the website and then upload the maps to be used with Neatline and Omeka. Neatline also suggests installing a Geo server, which is a high-performance open-source geospatial server. That is where your data lives. It can be installed through the community-based OpenGeo suite for upgrading and configuring the server. It's not costly, but does require technical knowledge and support for Java. In order to use your georeference maps, such as web layers for exhibits, you will need to have a server for the data that is for geospatial data. ArcGIS's parent company, Esri, offers servers for a fee. GeoServer is open source, and for those just doing occasional georeferencing, you can do your georeferencing / georectifying in MapWarper. You are able to download your data from the website and or use a specific URL from the website in your map-based Neatline exhibits. There are various options for doing this type of work / project, and it really depends on your institution's needs, staff time, and the resources you have for what you decide to use. For my initial project, I used ArcGIS for georeferencing of the maps from the Grace Towns-Hamilton papers. Working with the GIS lab coordinator at Clark Atlanta University led to this decision. I was able to use their instance and learn from the coordinator about the application. With ArcGIS, I have been able to georeference a good number of the maps in the collection. My use of ArcGIS for georeferencing led me to consider using Storymaps for creating the digital display of the maps, which is an application provided through ArcGIS. Through using Storymaps, we have the ability to use the georeference maps as web layers, so they can act as the base maps for the digital exhibit / story. So think of as the Google map. Storymaps allow for the use of video and images in stories with the combination, not only the maps in the collection, but photos and documents from this collection and others. We are able to present a narrative on major events and subjects in Atlanta and Georgia, such as the redistricting of Atlanta's congressional district that led to more African American representation in Congress. As I continue working with maps in this collection and others, my goals are to be able to provide the best access for users, create interactive resources to engage users with primary sources, and consider and implement innovative ways to use not only the maps in our collection, but also other archival materials in our collection. Storymaps and other applications like it, such as Neatline for Omeka, provides us with the ability to do this work. Linked on the screen are Storymaps that use historical maps that were my inspiration for my work. I recommend exploring those stories when you have time. I want to briefly discuss the benefits and challenges of this project. First, being an archivist. My training is in archival work. I did not encounter GIS until I started this project, and I'm never sure that I understand what I'm doing. I just sound like I do sometimes. So I am presented with the challenge of learning something completely outside of my field, but that works fairly well with my type of knowledge. I'm also learning how to do this whole process from start to finish. It was my first time ever scanning maps, first time ever using the application. It is a new learning experience and a learning curve. Investigating and learning each application meant learning new skills that didn't always make sense to me. However, I will say that the majority of applications I worked with had great tutorials, which brings me to my next challenge of time. When I originally started this project, it was a part of the processing of the collection. I had to fit it around other projects once I was done with the collection. But it helped me to learn better time management. And lastly, this project currently does not involve a lot of people, but the people involved have different schedules, tasks, and responsibilities that they are working on. So in order to do certain tasks like map scanning, I had to work with the schedule of the GIS coordinator. It takes project management and being flexible. And that brings me to benefits. Even though my skills going into this project were just in archival work, like I said, I have been able to add new skills that helps with expanding the resources that the archives have to offer. And I'm able to help others learn something new too, not just students, but other archivists and librarians at my institution. It is a weird time and there's a large need for digital resources. This work increases the digital resources available from the archives. It brings greater awareness to the collection and other collections and resources in the archives. This way, our stakeholders know more about what we have to offer. Another benefit is that this project is a gateway for innovation in the archives and a great way to interact with primary sources. It has allowed for collaboration with other institutions and departments that we don't normally work with. Now you will hear about a grant project that my colleagues have been working on. Thank you.
Thanks, Brittany. Hi, everybody. I'm Cliff Landis. I'm the Digital Initiatives Librarian at the Atlanta University Center Robert W. Woodruff Library. And today I'll be presenting on a project that we've been working on for the past year, which is Gantt. So to briefly introduce the project design, the goal of this one-year project was to create a publicly editable directory of Georgia's natural, cultural, and historic organizations, NCHs, in Wikidata, allowing for quick retrieval of location and contact information for disaster response via a website. This project was funded through a 2019 Lyricist Catalyst grant. But first, before we dive in too deep, let me give you a little bit of background information for context. So why do we need this tool? Well, natural disasters are impacting Georgia at an alarming rate. In the past couple of years, Georgia has experienced multiple months of flooding rainfall, a major tornado outbreak, and multiple hurricanes. And as the largest US state east of the Mississippi with 159 counties, Georgia has extensive and diverse natural, cultural, and historic sites that preserve and document the unique history and culture of the state. It would aid statewide efforts if our partner organizations could access a list of NCH organizations both before and after a disaster strikes. So for a real-time example, see this Hurricane Dorian event map used by FEMA to track NCH organizations in the path of the hurricane. We shared what data we had with FEMA from our coastal counties, and you can see that this data is being used in real-time emergency response. So in the past, how would cultural heritage emergency responders find these NCH organizations impacted by disasters? Well, directory information is out there, but it's scattered in different data sets, none of which are publicly editable or up to date. So we started with the Georgia Historical Records Advisory Council's, or GRAC's, Historical and Cultural Organizations Directory. Then we wanted to add the Georgia Historical Society's Directory of Affiliate Organizations and the Georgia Association of Museum and Galleries Directory and the Georgia Public Library Service Directory and several other directories, which we estimated at over 1,500 organizational records combined. We knew that there would be some overlap between the directories, but we couldn't know how much until we really got into it. So now I'll talk to you about our workflow for collecting, verifying, and uploading the data. So Wikidata is a free and open knowledge base that acts as a central storage place for the structured data of Wikipedia and its Wikimedia sister projects. When we were first planning the project, we searched for all the GLAM institutions in Georgia that have coordinate information, which only pulled up a few results. But if you search for GLAM in the United States, you would end up getting more search results showing up in Georgia. And this has to do with how the information is tagged, and this is the type of data that we were cleaning and updating. We're also doing this project to find smaller hidden institutions, such as the Georgia Rural Telephone Museum located in Leslie, Georgia. Even though there was already an entry in Wikipedia, we didn't have this institution in any of our partners' data sets. So it's been very rewarding to identify these lesser known institutions and add them to the data set so that they're available for disaster relief in case of an emergency. Now we have made quite a bit of progress over the last year. We've widened our searches beyond GLAM to get as many relevant NCH organizations as possible. And as of October 16th, our big search for the entire state returns over 1,800 organizations. This search includes things like historic districts that don't have contact information, so that emergency responders can cast as wide a net as possible when responding to a disaster. Being able to export contact information in a table format will help emergency responders reach out to NCH organizations to see if they need assistance before and after a disaster strikes. So how do we actually do all of this? Well, first, we started by scraping websites, gathering lists from partners, and creating giant spreadsheets of NCH organizations. We then use free website tools to enrich the data with things like county information. Next, we loaded each spreadsheet into OpenRefine and began matching up organizations to their respective records in Wikidata. Then we reconciled our fields against Wikidata's schema inside of OpenRefine. We have our data dictionary available on our GitHub site if you're curious about how we mapped the spreadsheets to Wikidata's schema. Next, we created references for each linked data triple. So for every single fact that we uploaded to Wikidata, we supplied 3 values: the fact itself, the reference URL, and the retrieval date. By citing our sources with snapshots and timestamps, we're giving folks in the future the ability to trace and update each fact as things change over time. And most of the source data sets included organizations that had since dissolved by the time we got started. So using references like this allowed us to track which organizations had dissolved, which allows us to exclude dissolved organizations from our search results. This is why, although we touched over 1,900 records, the number that actually show up in search results is less. Then we uploaded the information to Wikidata. This slide shows the Aragon Historical Society, which we added as part of the testing phase. After the data was uploaded to Wikidata, we performed quality control on each entry to verify that things are correct, especially the location coordinate data. Sometimes getting that coordinate location data is tricky, but we tried to place the marker on top of the building itself, since after a disaster, street signs and other wayfinding markers are often damaged or destroyed. So now I'll show you the end product and talk a little bit about the future of the project. So the Gantt website allows users to search for NCH organizations by the whole state, by GIMA region, and by individual county. GIMA is the Georgia Emergency Management and Homeland Security Agency, and it splits the state into 8 emergency response regions consisting of multiple counties. So here's a look at the Gantt website's search results page using GIMA Region 1 in Northeast Georgia as an example. The results page displays both a map and a table of directory information for the NCH organizations. We recognize that the website may be used on mobile devices after a disaster, as cultural heritage emergency responders will be out in the field. So we're making sure to give the website a responsive design, with my particularly favorite feature, a table that converts to single cell format on mobile devices to prevent users from having to scroll left and right to see everything. We also give users instructions on how to export the tabular data directly from Wikidata to a CSV or comma-separated value table file. And that information can then be imported into other systems like WebEOC, which is a web emergency operations command software that's used for statewide emergency responders. So we're getting a lot of help from our partner organizations to get the word out about the project, not only to their member institutions, but also more broadly to similar organizations in other states. And now that we've completed the project, we've handed the tool over to our state-level partner organizations for long-term maintenance and sustainability. So HERA, the Heritage Emergency Response Alliance, SHARE, the Savannah Heritage Emergency Response, and GIMA, Georgia Emergency Management and Homeland Security Agency, have already integrated the final product into their disaster workflow procedures. Galileo, our statewide virtual library, is graciously providing website hosting for the tool. And Galileo and the Georgia Public Library Services Archival Services and Digital Initiatives will work together to perform annual updates. So we built an emailer into the website so that folks at Galileo and GPLS can send out reminder emails once a year to NCH organizations requesting any updates to their contact information. If the information is changed, the edits can be made directly in Wikidata, but if the email bounces back, we can look at the organization to see if it has been dissolved. We've also included a self-submission update form on the site so that organizations can let us know as their contact information changes, if they so choose. So to make sure that everything associated with the project is free, transparent, adaptable, and reproducible, we've created a GitHub repository which includes everything associated with the project. An example of this is our workflow manual shown here, which walks you through the entire process we've developed step by step. Our first test in the field was in the lead up to Hurricane Sally just last month, September 2020, where we sent pre-storm warning emails to 330 NCH organizations in 4 of the GIMA regions. About 9% of the emails bounced, and so we're following up with those organizations to update their contact information and investigate whether they've dissolved. So now that the project is completely in place, we can look back and see that we've actually accomplished quite a lot. We have over 1,900 Georgia NCH organization records in Wikidata, and a single location on the web for emergency responders to identify organizations in affected areas. We've developed this project to be open and reusable, and we've made a plan for sustainability so that the data and the website continue to be useful into the future. And with that, I will hand things off to Justin.
Thank you very much, Cliff. My name is Justin Dela Cruz. I am the head of the Department of Data Science, Instructional Design, and Technology at the AUC Woodruff Library. So mainly I work on educational technology, digital literacy, and multimedia production, and teaching that to students and helping faculty with that. And I'm going to talk about how we can teach some GIS concepts in the classroom for the purpose of constructing interactive narratives. So Brittany mentioned the benefits of Storymaps in one case, which was mapping historical projects. We can also see these benefits from Storymaps in education because we live in an increasingly media-rich world, and we know our students have been exposed to many exciting images and audio recordings and videos. All of this sparks their interest in so many different topics. So when we go to teach in a classroom and when we go to ask them to write papers, it's hard to get them excited about writing a static paper when they've been watching all these high definition movies and TV shows, and when they're engaging with people on social media and sharing photographs and seeing a lot of really rich media from the news outlets. So what we can do is we can leverage our students' media experiences by encouraging them to think about how narratives can be enhanced with geographical information. So it's kind of like making a movie by mapping out scenes and talking about them in order and allowing viewers to look around on the map and see what everything is like in context. So tools like Storymaps and custom Google Maps allow us to provide this kind of experience, and they're excellent platforms to help us expand our students' spatial awareness and to show them the impact of telling stories through maps. So Esri Storymaps is a very powerful mapping technology, and Esri had these maps around beforehand, and then they developed this platform so people could create stories with maps. And so they combine locations, geographical information, and interactive maps with traditional storytelling to help everyone create an interactive experience. And the end result is something resembling an enhanced blog post or an online magazine feature. We can show giant moving images combined with text and maps to make our stories come alive off the digital page. And we can also embed videos, animations, charts, graphs, and other websites so we enhance our stories along the way. This is one example of a Storymaps assignment. We worked with Professor Samuel Livingston at Morehouse College to transform one of his traditional paper assignments for his students into an assignment that was filled with audio, visual, and mapping components. The course that he taught was called Africana Social Justice, the Case for Reparations, and it explored the historical, cultural, political, and economic dynamics and contexts surrounding the quest for reparatory justice since enslavement in African American and Anglo-Caribbean contexts. So we met with Professor Livingston, talked about his class, talked about his assignments and sort of the outcomes that he was looking for. And we decided to go with Storymaps as a way to encourage his students to compare these kinds of topics and these historic struggles for reparations using an African-centered historical approach that was augmented by attention to intersectional identity, ethics, and social contracts. So you can see some of the topics that students wrote about, including the history of sweetgrass basket making. And during this process, he asked the students to create digital maps like this so they can examine the history of these topics and sort of document African diasporic life chances and activist responses to oppression. So here's another example that shows that you don't necessarily have to use all maps in Storymaps. It is more or less an open platform where you can embed images, you can embed text, you can embed graphs and videos, and also maps. It's just that maps is the big selling feature for Storymaps. But one neat feature of the program is that each student in the class could work on a separate map individually. And so you see loss and recovery with housing, you see sweetgrass baskets, and you see from slavery to mass incarceration. These were each student's separate story maps that they worked on individually. And then we helped them combine them all into one digital experience where readers could learn all about reparations or the case for reparations. So each student in Professor Livingston's class took the time to research their own topic and make their own map. And then I assisted with integrating them into one story map that had one format that you could easily scroll through to read each section. And it kind of ended up like an interactive ebook where you had this experience of reading different topics by chapter, but there is that one unified theme of dealing with reparations and historical context with that. So one thing that I did want to encourage through this process was thinking about how information is represented visually and geographically, and also how it's represented on charts and graphs. And so I encourage students to use original data sets around economics and culture to visualize things and embed them into story maps. So this is a great feature in story maps where you can embed entire websites as an iframe, and you can embed pictures and videos and interactive elements. So if you find other tools, they can work in combination with story maps. And that's what we're showing here with Datawrapper. Datawrapper.de is a robust way of visualizing data where you can upload spreadsheets and whatever data sets you have, and they walk you through the process of creating different charts and graphs. And so this ability to embed external charts, graphs, and graphics, and even entire websites into sections of story maps, it really gives you a maximum flexibility over what you want to show with your narratives. The sky's the limit with this. You can embed as much or as little content as you want. And what we did was help students when they needed it, balancing out text with images and embedding graphs into this kind of stuff. And so I did encourage students to look at tools like this and other tools like Excel where you can export graphs, and other tools online where you can create interesting visuals and try and embed them into story maps to augment the tools that we have there. And it was a great process, and I think students learned a lot about the impact of storytelling and how to pace things out and how to make that balance between text and visuals. Another tool for visual storytelling is custom Google Maps, and more recently they released custom Google Earth. And these are both extensions of their platforms to allow people to create their own interactive maps and Earth simulations. And so these platforms allow users to upload custom data sets that they might have, geographic data sets with location information, maybe business names or other information like this shark attack map that you see on the screen here. And what they can do is upload them as different layers. And so as you go through, you can upload maybe where the sharks were spotted, maybe where the attacks happened, and other things like that on separate layers. So then when your viewers go to your map, you can turn them on or off as they'd like to investigate whatever aspect of the data they would like to. So these platforms allow users to do all of that kind of stuff, and it creates a really interactive and rich experience for the viewer. And the educational benefit here is that students have most likely already used Google Maps and maybe Google Earth to navigate and to look up reviews and to find out where places are that they're going to. So there is some familiarity baked in. Students already kind of know what the platform is from a user perspective. And so now they go to be creators in this platform and see behind the scenes a little bit on how you can create maps. So showing that, that process kind of empowers them to use the platform in a way that they weren't before. So now they're using the platform to create information and not just to consume information. And this leads into the Framework for Information Literacy for Higher Education, which was created by HCRL to basically guide librarians on how to teach students and think about teaching information literacy. And so specifically when we talk about projects like this, we're encouraging students to visually display information on mapping systems. And this is in order to enhance their narratives. And it speaks to the ideas that information creation is an iterative process. And in this case, with maps as a vehicle for conveying their work. So this relates directly to the frame information creation as a process, which indicates that information in any kind of format is produced to convey a message, and it's shared via a specific method. So this iterative process is sort of like the research cycle where you create information, you revise information, and you disseminate it in different ways to different audiences. So this ties in directly with that process, since students are using maps and visual narratives to lead their readers through an experience like this. So they are the creators of the information, and they see what that process is like. We can also ask students to think about who's creating that information in the maps. So maybe they've never considered the engineers and the users who've added the navigational information, the best route information, the reviews for restaurants and other places on Google Maps and other places. We can ask everyone to think about what is that process like, who are the people contributing to that, and have they contributed to it? And so once we show that, maybe we can show that they're empowered to create information and share it with others. And we can also show that authority is constructed and contextual. So this is another frame in the framework. And the idea is that we often rely on maps for navigation without really knowing who put in the information and whether it's trustworthy or not. So this relates directly to authority is constructed and contextual, because that is all about talking about information resources that reflect their creators' expertise and credibility, and how they're evaluated based on the information need and context in which the information will be used. So we think about constructive, we could think about contextual, and the communities of people creating that information and also consuming that information. So it all relates directly back to the framework, which is a great guide on how to teach information literacy. So in summary, we're talking about geographical systems and archives and libraries and instruction, and how it provides these very specific benefits to our patrons and students in ways that can't be easily obtained doing other processes. So the next time you approach a new project, consider approaching it spatially. And of course, please feel free to get in touch with us if you'd like to work on similar projects in geography.